Beyond compensation, the evolving total rewards toolset. What is the most effective tool to support retail employees in a post-COVID workplace? Traditionally, you may say compensation, but this isn't what studies show. Welcome to another episode of Real HR, where we get together with HR and talent management leaders to understand their real HR challenges and what creative ways they use to overcome them. Hello, David Giesman, Vice President of Global Total Rewards at Designer Brands. Welcome to Real HR.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
David, it's a pleasure to have you here. Could you please, maybe tell us a little bit about Designer Brand?
Sure. So Designer Brands may be best known as DSW in the United States, a retail footwear retailer in most of the states of the country, most major cities. We also, though, shifted to be called Designer Brands when we acquired Vince Camuto, which is a designer, producer, wholesaler of footwear. So they design shoes and sell them to Macy's and Nordstrom. We also have a retail footwear company in Canada called Shoe Co. We've also opened DSW stores, but so Designer Brands has become a global multi-faceted company. So it used to be just really a U.S. retailer, but that's who Designer Brands is. So we're in the U.S. and Canada for retail, but our footprint is because we produce shoes overseas. So we have employees in China, Brazil. We're opening an office in Vietnam, and so we do have those global operations.
Got it. Can you give us a sense how many employees in the organization?
Sure. So we're at about 14,000. That took the pandemic. So we were more than that, and we were up to say 15, 18,000 in the past, and then there was obviously some reductions in 2020, and we're bouncing back. So about 14,000 right now globally. Obviously, the majority are in the U.S. 2,000, I'd say, are in Canada. Pretty small numbers in China and Brazil, in less than 500 in total.
Got it. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about your role. We'll get into some of the questions, but I just want to understand, VP of Global Total Rewards at a multinational retailer. What are we talking about here?
Yeah. So it's interesting, Total Rewards has evolved, and I still get pinged quite a bit by businesses who think Total Rewards has to do with rewarding customers and customer experience versus HR and comp and benefits. But organizations like World at Work, they've used the Total Rewards model for many, many years to capture the fact that rewards goes way beyond comp and benefits to many other facets that affect the employee experience. And so many of those things wind up having even a bigger impact on retention and engagement and recruiting than just the comp and benefits. But I own compensation, benefits. I also own HR technology and payroll. So all those aspects of HR.
I wanted to go back to a comment you made, when I asked you about headcount and you were talking about COVID and the pandemic. And I want to look at it from a slightly different angle and get your input on this. In the last decade or so, when I was talking to retail organizations, it was really focused on business transformation, shifts in consumer demand and needs, the decline of the shopping mall, the rise of the digital channel, and then COVID hit. And my perception is we're back at fundamentals. How do I keep my stores open? How do I keep my workforce in place? I'm wondering, when you look at this before and after, not that we're after COVID, but we're sort of getting to that after period. How did that impact the Total Rewards role, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I think COVID, had a huge effect of accelerating Total Rewards and talent to the forefront of what's important to an organization. I think you're right in that before the pandemic there was maybe more focus on the business and what changes needed to be made in technology and to the changing behaviors of the customer as they shop digitally and in stores, the whole omni-channel. And we always said people are important to us, talent is important, but that all just got thrown to the forefront. If you can't have a store staffed, you can't sell. If you have to close the store because you don't have enough people even to be on the floor, and you have to close the store, it doesn't matter, how great you are at omni-channel. I think talent and the rewards and all the, the way things shifted with the Great Resignation and people pulling out of the workforce and the supply and demand of talent, and the shift to the employee having leverage to dictate the terms of their employment and compensation, all that has really accelerated the fact that Total Rewards has become more important today, I think, than ever before in my career. And it's made us in a critical part of the business, not just the organization and not just HR, but as a business partner and leader in the organization on how are we going to be profitable.
Got it. Let me ask you, when we spoke before, we talked about some specific programs or examples that you put in place during the pandemic and in response to that situation that were not there before. So maybe you can speak to one or two, provide one or two examples.
Sure. It'll be hard to keep it to one or two because I wrote down a few different ones, but just ticking off some things like on the benefits front. We had telemedicine before the pandemic, but we really enhanced that in that we said we took away the copay. We said that it's unlimited use for medical and for mental health, and that was a great adaptation that was helpful with our corporate folks all going to a remote work and situation. We embraced hybrid and remote work. Obviously we were forced into it for corporate positions with the pandemic, but it became clear that after we all kind of adjusted to it, it became like the new normal, and it's what everybody wanted. And when we started having conversations more than a year ago about potentially returning to the office in a hybrid or full-time capacity, our employees were telling us, don't take that away from me. Don't force that. If you force me back into the office 5 days a week, I'm going to go look for a job where that's not a requirement, because I value that flexibility so much. So we embraced it and said, that's a differentiator that will work in our favor if we allow associates to do that. And on the comp side of things, as an example, we said, okay, we're going to change our comp approach and our whole framework to say that when we hire you for a corporate position that used to be in Columbus, Ohio, but now you're in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that is now your work location. And if that is a higher cost area to employ someone, we're going to pay based on the fact that you're working there, and your home is now your work location. So we utilized what we already had in terms of a nationalized geographic pay structures, because we have stores all over the country. So we already were used to doing it for the stores population, but we implemented that right away for the corporate positions and said it's okay to hire jobs and fill jobs with folks all over the country. They don't have to be in Columbus, Ohio. So we embraced hybrid, remote, flexibility, changing pay structures. Those are just a couple ways, but so many others. I just got an email before this that reminded everyone that there's virtual yoga available. We had in our corporate office here, we have a workout facility, and we had associates who were certified to teach yoga, and they would do those classes obviously in person, and we converted that to virtual. So free yoga's free for associates, and of course now it doesn't matter if you're in Canada or the US or where you are, you can do the virtual yoga. So in some ways, making things virtual leveled a playing field and made things more accessible. And anyway, so it's just interesting how much did change.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. And what's interesting is some of the things you describe are extremely practical, in the sense that it's easy to understand. We pull this lever and something good happens, or we fulfill a specific employee need. Some of them are cultural. I think we're seeing on the talent side sort of the digital aspect that we've seen on the business side with business transformation, we're seeing the omni-channel, if you will, of the
Sure.
workforce.
Right.
I need to write that down. That's a good one. Let me ask you this. I was speaking to another people leader at another retailer, and she described something really interesting that I wasn't aware of. She said during the first part of the pandemic, they were in sustain mode, helping their employees deal with the challenges, while they were figuring it out, but really helping employees. And then she said it was this change almost overnight, where it changed from supporting your employees to keeping them and retaining them. And in those salary conversations and the wages conversation, the great resignation. And I'm wondering if this is something you had experienced, that split between supporting our workforce and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what's going on? We have to change gears in a different mindset.
Right. I mean, when I think back to 2020, so we all of a sudden went from being, again, corporate positions, stores, and distribution center folks are still going into work, right? So the corporate positions are the ones that really, in March 2020, went from 100% in the office to 100% remote work from home. And not only did the work change, but everyone was uncertain about this pandemic and our health and our safety and my job. Am I going to lose my job? So much was in flux and people were so worried and stressed. And dealing with all the change and working from home and isolation. And so I'd say from March 2020 through the end of that year, the mode was survive, sustain, support our folks, help them adjust, and manage through it. And during that time, and we furloughed a huge portion of our workforce. We had to close all of our stores. We were a non-essential retailer, unlike, say, a grocery store that got to stay open. So there was a couple months there where stores closed longer in Canada. So those employees got furloughed. We furloughed folks in the home office. And then later that year in 2020, brought folks back. And so I would say 2021 was where I feel like that's when all of a sudden now, like, working from home and remote became a new normal. But that's also when, like, people started reassessing their priorities and looking at their finances and looking like, maybe I'm not paying for daycare now. Maybe I don't need to have that. We need to have 2 jobs in the family, or maybe I don't need that extra part-time job on top of my full-time job. And a lot of shifts in the workforce, and that's when the Great Resignation took hold, and we really did see a big shift towards what do we got to do to recruit and retain.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about some of those things that we got to do. And I want to take, again, a different angle. It used to be, and this goes back 15, 20 years, that retail organizations were really all about the frontline employees, right? It was store operations, people in the store, what goes on at the store. And then with the digital transformation, you now have a workforce that includes data scientists, right? And big data and IT and software developers, and the range of roles, personnel is the needs. I'm assuming has grown significantly over the years. How do you create? Is it a size one fits all approach? Is it a size one does not fit all approach? When you're trying to think about total rewards, retention, engagement,
Right.
those kind of issues.
Yeah, I think starting last year, we really had to segment our population and customize rewards to certain populations. Like, stores became their own, unique needs, and not just within the stores, the full-time management versus the part-time hourly store associate, two totally different kind of populations in terms of needs. Let me just give you an example. So our full-time folks always have been eligible for paid time off, right? So you get whatever, 17, 20 days of paid time off as a full-time person, both in corporate and as a store management. Traditionally, part-time store associates who work 15 hours a week, they get no paid time off. Now, a number of jurisdictions around the country had put in paid sick time as a requirement, We last year implemented and said, okay, entire part-time stores population, you get 40 hours paid time off every year that is available. So it's not just for sick, and you can use it for whatever. So you don't have to then play that game of, well, I want to use it for vacation, but I have to lie and say I'm sick in order for it to qualify. So we just said no, it doesn't matter what, you go ahead and use it for whatever you want. So just adding paid time off to all of our part-timers was a huge benefit to them, something very valuable to them, as valuable as more money in their hourly pay rate. And we did that because of the need to recruit and retain them because of the changes in the dynamics of the workforce last year. So very specific changes we made targeting distribution center employees, corporate employees, stores full-time, stores part-time. So yes, we saw a lot more. Some things are one size fits all. I mean, the 401k match is the same 401k match for everybody because it has to be, really. But where there's opportunity to differentiate, we have done that. Where there's opportunity maybe to offer a program, it's available to all, but it's maybe aimed at knowing that a certain part of the population is going to take more advantage of it than another. So for example, one thing we rolled out, so we had tuition reimbursement in the past, where if you're full-time, you could qualify to get, some money to match and pay for tuition, but it was limited to full-time and you had to have been here a year and all that. We expanded to offer debt-free, the opportunity to earn a college degree debt-free, like no cost to you as the employee. It's a partnership. It's a combination of a partnership with some different online institutions that offer degree programs. Also an institution that offers a lot of the general ed classes that can be taken, again, at no cost. And we still have the tuition reimbursement on top of that. But we did that, and that's aimed more so at that store population and that lower, maybe the part-time or the lower level managers. So maybe they come work for us while they can get a degree and they don't have to incur a lot of any cost or any debt, and we're okay with the fact if that means they wind up leaving us down the road. Also, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion quite a bit, and sometimes we also look at programs to say how could it be a great benefit to help with recruiting, with retention, but also how can it help with us with offering more inclusive benefits and ones that maybe particularly are helping give a leg up to folks who are more disadvantaged.
I love it. So let's take this one step further, if you will. So we're now in a labor market where there's increased pressure on salaries, right? Mm-hmm. We know it's one of the things that are driving inflation. It's a macro event almost. But raising salaries is really expensive at the end of the day, with your workforce. I'd like us to watch, a recent study that was done in 2022 that compared the impact of non-monetary benefits. In this case, it's employee recognition to that of, the concept of a fair salary on key employee engagement metrics, and then maybe we can talk about it a little bit. So let's watch it together. So what's your take on the role of non-monetary benefits? Sometimes I talk to compensation and benefits people, and they're so entrenched in this world of numbers and salaries as this is the key motivator. This is the lever that we have, right? We need to raise salaries $2 an hour in order to have an impact. I'm wondering about what's your take on these non-monetary benefits, and if have you seen them to be effective? Based on your experience.
Right. Well, I think absolutely. Willis Towers Watson, they have, for example, a total rewards model with 4 buckets. So you got your compensation and monetary rewards, you got benefits, you have career and development, and then work environment. And it's always been the case that if you say, what are the top 10 drivers of recruiting, what are the top 10 drivers of retention, and what are the top 10 drivers of engagement, it's always been the case that comp is at the top of the recruiting top 10, but it's bottom of retention, and it's not even usually on the top 10 of engagement. Like pay is not what drives engagement. So it is all the non-tangibles. It's my relationship with my manager, being recognized. Do I enjoy my work? Is my work rewarding? Do I feel like I'm contributing to a greater purpose? Or things like philanthropy. I have an opportunity to give back to my community or to give to organizations through my employer. And obviously career growth and enhancement is a huge, element of retention. Am I growing? Am I learning more? Am I being challenged? Am I being given an opportunity to get promoted? Where's that career path? It's always been the case that all those intangibles are the most important things for retaining and engaging associates. And it's more true today, just like the example on the remote and hybrid work. I've had my own people tell me, if you were to force me back in the office 5 days a week, I will leave. It's a direct correlation to retention. So more so today, the non-tangibles, I'd say, are even more important than ever before. And now you have to throw in things like, if I'm not present in a corporate office, how am I getting exposure to be seen by leaders? How am I having an opportunity to hear from other leaders or connect with other leaders? Things that are workarounds that we have to come up with in a remote work world to replace some of the things that were there before. How do we onboard people? How do we bond them to the company, to the culture, to the values? All those things, but so it's even more important than it was before. But certainly the non-tangibles, flexibility, is it okay for me to go on vacation to Florida for a month where I'm going to take PTO for part of the time and I'm going to work 3/4 of the time because I could be doing the exact same thing here? Is that okay? Do I have that flexibility? But non-tangibles are hugely important and huge drivers. And to me, that's what the difference is between a comp and benefits professional and a total rewards professional, is that the total rewards professional is looking at the whole picture. Doesn't mean you own everything. I don't own learning and development, but learning and development in career ladders, in training, and talent management and succession planning and all of that. Other parts of HR own different things, but if I don't consider those as part of the whole package, then I'm really only looking at a limited part of what affects all those elements of attracting and retaining.
It's fascinating. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about my experience. I've spent a decade working with talent management organizations. Mm-hmm. On all of the items you talked about: career development, learning and development, talent acquisition, mm-hmm. Engagement, retention. Not once did we have talent, global rewards mm-hmm. in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which, in hindsight, now that we're having this conversation, is mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because you hold, some of the most effective levers out there mm-hmm. that can deliver outcomes in those areas. Very interesting. It's a very interesting, non-intuitive insight, at least for me. So let me ask you, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just a couple years before the pandemic, Korn Ferry, a consulting firm that specializes in retail, they would put on a webinar, conference for comp professionals. A couple times a year, and a couple years before the pandemic, they said, hey, next time invite your talent management professional with you. And we started going together, and it was back, so this was a good 4 years ago, that I'd say we started to really see the linkage, and I started working a lot more closely with talent management we were pretty siloed before, but I'd say 4 or 5 years ago that really started to change, and it's only accelerated with in the recent year or two.
It'll be interesting to see what my talent management network has to say when they see this. Maybe as a last question before we wrap up, how do you measure success in the role, or even when you look at a specific program? If I look at the tuition program, it's really hard to put a dollar amount, to me, naively, from an ROI perspective. How do you approach this?
Yep. That's a great question, and I think it's one we need to make sure we spend time thinking about. I think the answer is different for different programs. So I think in some cases you're going to look at utilization just to see how much is it being used to determine is it worthwhile. I think you're going to look at things like the breadth of its availability. So like for us, if we're going to spend money on something, if it's something that is kind of available and we think could be broadly used, like there's a value to that, the fact that it's potentially touching more folks versus a benefit that's very narrow in scope. I think in some cases, like there's value in kind of a PR value to say you offer it, even if no one uses it, or very few use it. For example, adoption assistance, very few use it, but it's important to be able to say, that you offer that. Obviously, cost per use, I think, is an element of measurement. So if it is used by a few people, like, are you paying a PEPM per employee per month for the entire population, even though it's only being used by a few? That's not effective. If you're just paying based on use, and that's pretty small, like there could be good value. So I think there's obviously anecdotal feedback that we might get from our HR business partners, from associates themselves, or from leaders where they say, I love this program. I mean, Teledoc is so convenient. I was using it obviously like way before the pandemic, but I can share examples where it was midnight and I had a sick kid and I could call Teledoc and I could talk to a doctor and get in the moment. What a great convenience and so much value to me. I didn't care at the time whether that was going to cost me nothing or $50. It was so important in the moment. We do take surveys. We sometimes to get direct feedback. We will sometimes measure ROI. We'll say, is there an actual savings? So, for example, like a care coordinators or care concierge service where they proactively reach out so someone goes and maybe sees a doctor, gets a diagnosis before they go see a bunch of other like specialists or whatever. A care coordinator is reaching out to them and helping manage that claim before other claims. So that's one that you might say like what, and they do provide like their reports on what they consider to be like cost avoided versus what we're paying. So in some cases there is a direct ROI. Like the debt-free education, it might be like this is valuable to us because it supports our DE&I strategy, and it's not a lot of dollar cost, but value because of how it contributes to that strategy. And then I think too, like, what is the level of effort to manage it? Because if it takes a huge amount of manpower to manage a program, there's a cost to that, and that prevents them from being able to spend time on other things. So that's another. All those things are elements that we might look at to evaluate success or value.
David Giesman, Vice President of Total Rewards at Designer Brands. Thank you so much for taking the time and for having this very open and transparent discussion. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was very fun. Thank you for having me. Be a leader in terms of putting forward a point of view that says, here's what I think we should do and why. What leaders want, the executives want, is they want Total Rewards professionals to come forward, and this would apply obviously if you're just a benefits professional or a comp professional, but come forward with here's what I think we should do, here's what I'm recommending we do, Here's the rationale behind it. It's fine to put it forward and then let collaboration and let others, through their input and through the process, refine it, kick it out as a bad idea. It doesn't really matter. The CEO doesn't expect you to be perfect, to get everything right from the beginning, but to come with a solid, recommendation and point of view that's backed up by data and rationale. There's such a unique opportunity right now for Total Rewards professionals to play such a critical role in shaping the organization going forward. There's such an appetite to spend money on rewards like never before, and so you really gotta take advantage of this and take a strong leadership position.
Thank you for watching this episode of Real HR. Like, subscribe, and share. Stay tuned for our next episode featuring another leader in the HR and talent management space.